bring in Jesse Byrns. He's an associate editor at The Hill, and he joins us now from our Washington bureau. Jesse, let's begin with this feud between the president and Senator Corker. Obviously, we wanted to talk about Niger because that's very important, what the United States is doing in West Africa, what happened on the night that we lost 4 soldiers. But because of the things that the president has said, this has been reignited ahead of this big lunch today on taxes. So what do you make of it? What is the impact also on tax reform and the impact on the Republican Party that you have the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee saying that the president is being untruthful?
Well, there were already high stakes going into today for President Trump. This is the first meeting of the Senate Republican caucus on Capitol Hill that he has attended this year. He attended it last year as the Republican nominee. So there are already high stakes going into this, a lot of drama. He's been feuding with McCain for months. He's been feuding with Corker for months. And now you have this back and forth with senior Republican Corker, who's obviously a chairman, as you said, of Foreign Relations at a time when there's a lot of questions about this attack in Niger and other major issues like North Korea and Iran, calling the president of the United States utterly untruthful. It's a little bit verbose there with respect to the senator. He's essentially calling him a liar, right? And so that's something that is, huge. It's a remarkable moment to see that kind of play out ahead of this meeting. And Corker, Republicans can only afford 2 defections on tax reform and still get this plan passed. And so there's very little breathing room for them to lose any kind of votes and to make these kind of personal feuds even worse.
The other thing that Corker said was that he hoped the White House would step aside and let the legislators, let the lawmakers actually craft the law. We know how he feels, but what about the other senators?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure on President Trump at this moment. I think he, to a large extent, learned his lesson on health care. He has to, step up, and he has to, make these calls. He made a conference call to House Republicans on Sunday. He's already gone on the road to a number of states pitching this tax reform plan, and Republican senators really want Trump to use the full weight of his office to put this behind the tax reform effort and to really get out there and to put the emphasis on that. Of course, these kind of personal feuds and squabbles on the side detract from that. At the end of the day, do they actually take away votes? That remains to be seen.
Jesse, I saw some reporting from Maggie Haberman over at the New York Times about how the White House feels that they are embattled, that the press is constantly calling the president of the United States out, and they feel that they're being treated unfairly. But the reality, and I just want to know what you're hearing from other lawmakers, is that many of these issues, many of the things that are being reported by the press are because the president of the United States has either said them or he's tweeted them or something that he has done, he has launched. In other words, when he says that he called every single Gold Star family and sent them letters, reporters are able to go back and fact check that. When he mentions things like, Senator John McCain is not a hero because he was captured. These are all things that he has said and done. And I get it. His supporters perhaps feel that the press is on the attack when it comes to the things that the president has said and done in his administration. But the reality is that they are basically his own doing.
That's right. I mean, there's definitely this sense of this Trump White House, obviously, leaning into some of these attacks. We saw, this is 8 days now where we've been, talking about this Gold Star family that Trump, kind of started this feud with a Democratic lawmaker in Florida, and that escalated to yesterday involving the widow herself, going back and criticizing the president's handling of that call. But yeah, I think this ultimately starts with some of these comments that, are obviously widely reported because they're combative in nature. If he's going after his predecessors or he's making some type of claim that has to be verified, and so media outlets are going to chase those stories, and eventually the Trump White House can either move on or try to defend itself and go on the offensive, and they've opted for the latter.
A lot of people have accused this president of deliberately distracting, and certainly he's had some bad press in the last few days with the attack in Niger and the phone call. But I'm wondering whether or not you think any of this is strategy, or is this just President Trump being himself?
Yeah, I think this is something that we've seen going back, years now. The last 2 years of him running his campaign and now in office, he doesn't back down from any kind of fight. We see that regardless of who it is. We saw him, in the Gold Star family feud, feuding with the Democratic lawmaker for days on end, and not the family there until yesterday. But defending himself in that call, regardless of who is launching that criticism. GOP lawmakers, senators, they're hoping that he moves on from this kind of stuff. But as we see from Corker and others, they're getting more outspoken in their criticism of him, calling him utterly untruthful today on Twitter. It's a remarkable comment coming from a senior Republican on Capitol Hill.
All right, Jesse Byrns at the Hill. Thank you, Jesse. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.